Alrighty, everybody. So, welcome to the month of December. Hard to believe we are in the final month of 2025, and it has been quite the ride, to say the least. So, let's go ahead and start out with some economic news for next week. Monday, we are going to have some PMI and ISM manufacturing within 15 to 30 minutes of the market open, so we are going to want to be aware of those. Powell is going to be talking in the evening, so obviously that won't impact the markets, but it could have an impact on Tuesday morning. So we'll just have to wait and see how that goes, along with Fed Vice Chair Michelle Bowman, who's going to be testifying. I don't know exactly what that's about, so I'm going to have to do a little bit more research into that one to figure out, could that be a market mover? But obviously everything is going to be around rates. Is the Fed going to lower rates in December? That's all the market cares about, and the market believes that they're going to, which is why you have seen this huge rally to the upside over the last 3 to 4 days. Wednesday, important, we're going to have ADP employment number, so this will definitely be one to watch to see, is employment actually worsening? So the unemployment rate actually ticked up on a year-over-year basis, so we'll want to see where that comes in. And then we're going to have some import prices. We're going to have PMI and, again, more ISM manufacturing. So we will see the variance or the difference between these numbers from Monday to Wednesday. Now, I think it's a little odd that they have them listed. So what I'm thinking is that they have the months incorrect, that one of these is October and then this one is November. But we shall see. Thursday, jobless claims. We're going to want to definitely keep an eye on that one. And then during the market open, we'll have Michelle Bowman that's going to be speaking as well. And then the big day is going to be Friday. So we have personal income, personal spending. Okay, so these are your delayed reports from September, your PCE from September, your core. So is inflation going up, right? That's what everybody wants to know. And then also consumer sentiment. Now, interestingly enough, consumer sentiment has been pretty robust. And we've seen that with overall consumer spending. And then finally, we're going to have consumer credit. Now, the one thing that I did read an article on is that banks are declining credit at one of the highest rates in history, which is kind of interesting. So I'm sure some of that has to do with the fact that consumer credit is up to $1.4 trillion, right? Auto delinquencies are at an all-time high, as are repossessions. Foreclosures are ticking up, and if the job market is slowing, that's not going to bode well for some of the credit facilities. So that's where we're at with economic news. Let's take a look at the earnings calendar from this coming up week. So we're wrapping it up and we're getting closer to the end. So really, a couple that you might want to keep an eye on that could be potential plays is going to be a Dollar Tree as well as a Macy's. Now, I will tell you the retailers have been doing significantly better than expected. We saw that this week with Kohl's, as well as TJ Maxx and some of the other clothing retailers, and then possibly Salesforce, CRM. And then we'll want to listen to what Kroger has to say with, again, inflation and tariffs for food. And then the only one that might be worth watching if you want to take a look at it is going to be DocuSign. Let me throw Alta in there as well. This has been a favorite that got beaten down and recovered to the upside. So maybe do your charts on these and then trade them after earnings, but not before. So let's jump into some of the charts. I'm going to start with SPY. Again, this week, huge rally right off of these lows. Monday, November 24th, over the last several days, right? Just a run up. You really didn't even have an opportunity to short anything here, right? The short play came back here on Thursday of last week when they didn't know if the Fed was going to actually lower rates, kind of got a scare in the market. And then, the Fed governor comes out, I believe it was either Dallas or New York, and said, yep, we still see a Fed rate cut on the table. And then the market just bought that up, right? So very, very strong. We're getting back to this price pivot up here that I'd keep an eye on at this 683.66. And then again, we're not that far off from all-time highs, right? I mean, we're in the 680s. 689 was the market all-time high. So do we get that Santa Claus rally with a blow-off top to actually head to 700? Time will tell. Let's take a look at tech. Tech not quite as strong as the overall broader market, and it's primarily because banks have been participating to the upside, but we have seen a really nice move off these lows back down here at 581. I do think it's probably fairly safe to say that they will start to go for this gap fill up here at 626. Now note, we do have a lot of headwind above us here, but again, if the market is going to be greedy, I would not try shorting this, right? Just wait for a pullback to go long with calls. Let's look at the individual names. And I'm going to stick with some of the usual ones because I think those have given you the best opportunity to actually trade them with some precision. So Apple, and again, Friday and Thursday or Wednesday, Thursday we're closed for Thanksgiving. A little bit wonky here on the overall time, but we're holding in this channel. So we need to really get above 280 to go break this prior all-time high of 284.99. So keep an eye on those levels there. Let's take a look at Amazon. Amazon just barely above my price level. I do like this as a favorite to go long on the open on Monday morning. So let's keep an eye on this one and then push that into 240, possibly back up to the 250, right? If we get overall relative strength in the market. This one is looking pretty darn good. We don't have a lot of headwinds above us until we get all the way up here at 255. Microsoft has been one of the laggards. I got a little bit of a bid this week, nothing monumental, but it's an expensive stock, right? So this one, I really just have some opposition here at 494. We need to get above this to push higher, back up to 500s. I probably wouldn't trade this one. I think there's better opportunity elsewhere. But you want to chart these levels because you have to remember that Microsoft, Apple, and NVIDIA are going to move QQQ the most on an overall percentage basis. Let's take a look at Wall Street's favorite, Google. This thing has just blown everything else out of the water. Got a little bit of intrepidation into the market with NVIDIA, which is why NVIDIA was selling off, because Google's AI is leapfrogging a lot of technology out there. And then Meta approached Google to say, hey, we're interested possibly in your chips and your technology, which would mean they'd be buying from Google and not necessarily NVIDIA. So that's why you saw the huge hit earlier last week in NVIDIA as well as AMD. So is there going to be a new market leader potentially that enters the space to give NVIDIA and AMD a bit of a run for their money? But if we could hold above this 319, I would definitely look for calls. I don't like puts unless the entire market gets really weak. And then just note below we have a gap here. Again, we only chart gaps on a daily time frame, but this thing has been exceptionally strong. And speaking of Meta, let's take a look at that. This one's had a really great bounce off that 580 level, right, where we were consolidating down here for several days. Got liftoff. We are now at 647. This is another one I like in addition to Amazon to go long. Not a lot of overhead supply, 45-minute time frames, huge gap fill up here at the top. This thing trading on a PE basis is the cheapest that it has been in decades based upon their overall revenue and projected growth. So what obviously spooked this was the AI spend and what they're planning on doing in 2026. But I think, again, if you go out to a higher time frame here, right, I mean, even if you take a fib from this prior pivot here all the way down to the low, we are not even near the 50 fib until we get to 670. Right now, we're at 647. So I definitely think there's way more upside here in Meta. Let's go ahead and take a look at Tesla. Tesla's been kind of back and forth. Builds momentum, drops, builds momentum, drops. It's picking up a bit of momentum here. I do like this if we can stay above my price target that I have here of 427.93, right? You can see where we're just hovering back and forth within this level to actually go long back up into the 440s and 450s. So quite a bit of buyers. We do have some sellers up here, but right now, this is where we like to trade, in the black space, right? Buyers down here, sellers up here. This is open playing field. So that's where you want to look for those kind of opportunities. Let's go back to NVIDIA and let's look at the chip sector. So still some struggle, right? Really never caught a bid the day after Thanksgiving. Kind of struggling here and drifting lower. So keep an eye on this. This 177 has been a great demarcation in the stock price over time. Ideally, we'd love to pick it up cheaper down here at 167. So if we do have weakness, I'd be curious to see if we fall through this. Now looking at this on a 4-hour time frame, we are still mid-range here. So, we're back here where we've had all of this consolidation, and we are now back finding ourselves there again. We do have a huge gap, not a huge gap, but we do have a gap up here at 204. I don't necessarily see that coming to fruition, within this next week, but you never know. So even possibly if they have weakness on this, some overall puts to the downside, you just have to be careful with the stop loss. And Alphabet's Gemini 3 is really what's been gaining traction and threatening NVIDIA. So that's where I think people are getting a little nervous. AMD, let's take a look at that. This has had a good run, right? This recovered way better than NVIDIA did. And just look at this from a week ago, Friday, right, to this past Tuesday, all the way up to the upside. So if we hold 214, again, I do like this. I think this is so intriguing that we had this huge drop here. And again, this was, on the Google news and Meta that they just sold this. I did call out a bounce here at the top of the gap fill. And if you took that with even the 205 calls, and you could have just let it run till Friday, this thing printed like nobody's business. So that, again, this is why we chart our gaps. Now, I'm not going to go adjust my gap, even though it's maybe a buck or two lower. I want to watch what they do when they get down here again, eventually, for a third time. So I'm just going to kind of leave that one where we're at. Okay. One of the other ones, Palantir. Let me grab that one. Again, good recovery. If we hold 166.78, I think you could definitely go long back up here to 175. Good push higher, the pullback again with all the chips, and now we're recovering and moving back to the upside. And then two other ones keep an eye on, MicroStrategy, tied to Bitcoin, right? MSTR. Still some struggle here on this one. We'll see if it can recover, but if you'll know, we are trading between these two bands, right? And we're bouncing off this one down here at 174. So I do like that for you to go long. Ideally, if we could get 166, so be it. But what we really need Bitcoin to do is to break down from its current level of 91,000 back to 80,000. And if we get to 80,000, then we'll be back here at this 166 level. If it recovers, go long. If they fail this, definitely go short. Would not be taking puts going into demand, but I do like calls to the upside. And then the other one that's had a ton of relative strength, Robinhood, right? We do have a gap below. Okay, so this did gap up this week from Tuesday to Wednesday, and I would expect this to probably head higher. So when we zoom out on this one, right, this thing was up at 153. I know it does have a price target of 200, but if they can hold this 127.78, I think you'd be pretty safe to go ahead and look at some calls because we only have 30-minute supply and we could take this all the way up here to 132. So that's what I'll be watching this week. And again, as we near the holidays, especially as we get towards Christmas, volume will start to drop. And then it becomes much more difficult to technically analyze the stocks because they're a bit more erratic because you don't have the volume to keep them within the guardrails. So size down on your positions. Let's finish up 2025 strong, have a really good discipline going into 2026 so that we can crush it from that point forward. But with that, everybody, I will see you for live trading tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and have a fantastic Sunday fun day. I'll see you all soon.